Hi, this is Joe Speaks Truth. Just 3 years ago, New York City was placed under the harshest lockdowns out of the whole country. While things seem that they're going back to normal, I want to invite you all to listen to the untold stories of the many New Yorkers that had to survive lockdowns and vaccine mandates. Hello everyone, this is Joe Speaks Truth, and today with me I have Mo. This year he would have been a teacher for 25 years in the New York City public school system. And yeah, how are you doing today, Mo?
I'm present, living this life.
Okay, so there's a reason why obviously I wanted to have you here today. But before we get into the mandates and all of that stuff, I'm just going to ask you, why did you decide to become a teacher?
I wouldn't say that it's some noble reason. I actually became a teacher because I needed money. And actually, let me start by saying I needed a job because I had just graduated from Queensborough Community College. And, I've been living on my own. I've been out of work. And my aunt was like, they're hiring at my school. So I was like, all right. So I came to the school and I interviewed. I sat there. I watched the fire department come into the school. I watched the police department come into the school. I watched the EMS come into the school. I watched a teacher drag a kid into the main office by his neck, and I'm like, what am I doing here? But ultimately, it's because I needed a job. But then, I was young at that time. But then, as you live and you grow, you realize that certain things is just the universe or the Most High God just calls you to places where you need to be because there's a reason for you to be there. So I learned my reason afterwards. You know what I mean?
Okay. And how was your life before the year 2020?
I mean, before the year 2020, I was like everybody else, kind of like just, I was counting down the years till I'll be 25 years of service, right? Became a teacher after becoming a school aide, then a para, then a teacher. And then, I'm on that track to kind of retirement, which is kind of like, what you're kind of trained to do after you go to school and you get your career. You're like, what's the next thing after that? Next thing after that is just to retire, right? And, I was planning on, hopefully moving to Costa Rica one day. So yeah, I was counting down the years until it was my time to go. And it came quicker than I thought.
When they announced that there was a global pandemic and that they had to shut down everything, and then eventually they were like, oh, you guys have to work from home now. I was one of those people. What was your first reaction? Did you actually believe the narrative, or were you curious to see what was happening, what this virus was all about?
So look, I like to say I'm a member of the diaspora, right? That's my way of saying I'm a black man. I don't like to say I'm a black man, but I'm a member of the diaspora, which means that we live in distrust of government. It's just the bottom line. I grew up in Brooklyn. If you grew up in Brooklyn, you know that you don't trust the cops. You don't trust what your government is saying. And, I grew up in the era when they was talking about super AIDS. It was the AIDS virus, and then there was super AIDS. And then it was this disease that it's like a flesh-eating disease. You know what I'm saying? So all of these things you hear about on the news, but you never see in real life. So for a very long time, I heard about the coronavirus. I'm like, all right, yeah, that's just another one of those diseases that they're gonna say is deadly, but we don't necessarily see it come to our doorstep. So I wasn't necessarily believing the government because the government has always lied about, the government and the media, they've always lied. So I didn't trust it. I didn't know what it was about. I don't know if it was true, but I just knew that the government, whatever they're telling you on the television is just a lie for your vision.
Okay. So it seems like you were one of the few people like myself that knew from the beginning that something was off and that they were lying. And that was one of the main points that I was trying to tell people on social media, on Facebook, back in February 2020. But that did not go too well because people were like insinuating that I was like a sociopath or whatever the case might be. But then we saw that a lot of New Yorkers actually gave in, and it was shocking to me I'm a 90s baby, but I don't know. New York had a reputation for not taking anyone's crap. And then all of a sudden, everyone is compliant, shutting down their businesses,
Yeah.
schools, etc.
So look, to that point, New York, I'm sorry, but New York is not really New York anymore. New York is a gentrified version of itself. And I'm not, no shade on the folks, the outsiders, but the reality is that the outsiders brought in their culture. And when you look around your neighborhoods, your neighbor isn't the person you grew up on the block with anymore. You know what I'm saying? Your neighbor is somebody that moved in, that tracked all the way here for an opportunity. They tracked all the way here for their own career explosion. So when we say, "Oh, New York is not New York anymore," it isn't. And New York is composed of a bunch of outsiders. I grew up in the days of I don't know if you guys remember. Limerick Nelson, Gavin Cato. You know what I'm saying? It was an unfortunate story where a young boy was killed by a Jewish person, ran over a young boy. And the point that I'm trying to make is that New Yorkers took to the streets over that. You know what I'm saying? New Yorkers came outside and was like, yo, we're not having that. And they protested. That New York doesn't exist anymore. That New York is far, far gone. Many of those of us who grew up in New York, we left. In fact, when I look at myself as a teacher, at some point when I became a teacher, I actually left New York to move to New Jersey. But my conscience bothered me. And I couldn't let that happen. I was living in New Jersey and I was traveling back and forth to Brooklyn after, living in New Jersey. I was like, look, I was born in New York. I went to school in New York. I work in New York. Why am I living in New Jersey? And I pushed myself to come back to New York because I felt like there was an injustice because I'm not from New Jersey. No shade against New Jersey folks, but I'm a Brooklyn born baby. And so, but the issue is that a lot of folks didn't push back. A lot of folks saw the opportunity to buy a nicer house, that they could afford in a New Jersey or in an Atlanta, in a Georgia. And other folks decided to move into New York, and that changed the dynamic of New York. New York is no longer that city where you can knock on your neighbor's door and ask for a cup of sugar anymore, because your neighbor is not someone that grew up in your neighborhood. It's not someone who you could leave your kids with because you don't know where they're from. So that's why New York it's different. That's why people didn't push back.
No, it is different, and we had it really badly here. They did a great job at turning neighbors against neighbors. We had restaurants that were denying us service. We had to specifically go to certain places, or whatever the case might be. But as you saw, the restrictions kept accumulating. And then they were like talking about, hey, if you don't take this vaccine, you can't work here anymore.
Right. And that's when they went too far. You're gone too far now. You know what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, look, my mom's died when I was 18 years old, right? And I'm not trying to create a sob story, but the reality is I've been able to fend for myself from then. From since I was a kid, I didn't go to the government for help. I didn't, I did what I had to do. I figured things out. And this is kind of how it's always been for folks who are a member of the diaspora. For the most of us, you threw us into something and we figure our way through it or our way out of it. So the government in this era acted as though they were trying to save people when they've never saved people before. In fact, historically speaking, the government has never saved the community. It's always been the community saving itself.
Right.
So this time around, the government, they are, as you like to say, delusional, right? Because they are acting as though that it's their job to save the people, when it's the actual absolute reverse. It's the people's job to save its government, right? So, and for me, that's the gist of it. So when the mandates came down, it's like, well, this is the first time in history. Like I said, we've seen other viruses. We've seen the flesh-eating virus that we heard about on the news. We've seen the AIDS virus. We've seen the super AIDS and Ebola and all of the Zika virus and all of these other viruses that came down the pipeline. But never before has it been a virus that they're actually telling you that, well, we're going to tell you what to do and shut down. You know what I'm saying? And that was different. And I knew, since you didn't save me before, I don't expect that you're going to save me now. And since I didn't listen to you before, when I was at my lowest point, I didn't go to the government for help. If you guys are saying it's a pandemic now, I'm going to rely on myself and my God as I always have been. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Did you experience any opposition from family and friends? I don't know, did they think that you were crazy, or even coworkers? Did they think that you were crazy for like, hey, why would you give up your career of 20 plus years? Why not just go get the vaccine?
I mean,
Because,
definitely.
you know, I had people, for example, my mom, she's vaccinated, but she never thought the government should coerce anybody into doing it. But I guess she, in some shape or form, she thought I was foolish because she felt like that's good career with the Department of Education. Why would you let that go? So do you experience any of that?
Yeah. People are like, you know, I mean, very few people I could say were taking me to my face that, yo, you're crazy for doing that. You know what I mean? Because I guess I'm just kind of like a stubborn person, but, you know, but at the same time, there were people who were like, well, a lot of folks doubt that I would give up my job. They're like, you're just going to take it like every one of us. And I'm like, no, I'm not, because there's something greater than me. And, you know, that's the spirit. My spirit kind of gives me guidance as to what I should do, you know, whether go left, whether go right. And from day one, my spirit was telling me like, nah, there's something wrong with this vaccination situation. One of the things that I did struggle with was whether or not I was going to take a test. You know what I'm saying? The testing, you know, because it was kind of like a test, mask and test option to stay at school. And that's one of the things that kind of like was like, man, am I going to give up my job, you know, for lack of taking the test? It seemed trivial. But at the same time, it didn't sit well with my spirit. It didn't sit well with my spirit to actually take a test. So I pushed back against the test too. And in that, I can say that I was questioning whether I'm making the right decision on that. The vaccine, I never had a doubt in my mind that I shouldn't take the vaccine. That was just like, you know, I live a life of restrictions anyway in terms of dietary. You know, I don't eat a lot of things folks eat. You know, I don't. You know, I fast. I keep my body. You know, my body's sacred to me. My body's sacred to you know, to my spirit. So putting the vaccine inside of my body was not a question. But the testing, should I take a test? Should I shove something up my nose? Was something that I struggled with. But at the end, my spirit was like, nah, don't do it. And I didn't. And I've never been tested to this day.
It is funny that you mentioned the test, because I remember, and I'm pretty sure this might be your same situation. When they said that we had to stay home, my school sent like a form that we had to sign agreeing to be tested. But I'm like, why do I have to sign this if I'm home? I'm not physically at the school. This is when everybody was remotely, right? And then eventually, certain group of people started going to school because there was like a cluster of like children that were remote and children that were in person, or in person and remote.
I remember that, yep.
So then I at that time when a lot of people were going back to school, I was still remote because my one-to-one student was remote. And then eventually they decided to bring him back. And so I had to go, and I was, honestly, I'm gonna be honest, I was panicking because I was one of those people that I didn't want the mask, test, vaccine, nothing. I want nothing to do with this. I didn't want lockdowns. So when I went back to the school, I said, well, in the back of my head, if they call me, because they were randomly calling people to get tested, I was like, well, if they call me, this is gonna be it for me. I'm not even gonna wait for the vaccines, because I'm not gonna do this. So funny enough, my school only took the students, but they didn't take me the adult. And I remember
you were never tested.
No, they never tested me. So, but one of my coworkers, I remember she was texting me about one of her students crying because they did not want to get tested, and how they even had to call the parent because they were threatening that student with like, well, if you don't get tested, you're going to be sent home, or whatever the case might be. And just thinking about that made me feel so bad, because I'm like, I don't know if I would have been there, I probably would have said something, and then probably would have got me in trouble. But I never had to get tested at the school. When I was let go and they gave us, I don't know, they probably gave you the letter too from your principal saying you couldn't come back.
Yeah, I mean, I had my principal write me an extra letter saying
an extra one. Why?
Yeah, because you know, I'm always trying to think on the what's not being said. So for me, I was like, well, you're not going to get me on not reporting to work. So I didn't want to just not come in. Like I said, even if they tell me they say don't come in, if you don't give it to me in writing, right, I'm still showing up until school safety says,
Removes you.
You can't come into this building. Because now I physically am being barred from coming to the building. But so I had him write a letter stating like, look, do not report to work until you hear from Central. At least I have that documentation that, you know what, I want to come to work. You're telling me not to come to work. So I'm not coming because I don't want to be insubordinate. You know what I'm saying?
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I got that letter, but I remember that they said that I think I had received like an email. They said that it was because I was not I did not abide by the vaccine mandates, and also I did not comply with the testing. It's the two reasons why they said that I shouldn't be at the school,
Right.
or whatever the case might be. But then when you were let go, how were you able to get around financially? Did you have to take a extra gig like a lot of us did? Were you relying on your savings like also like a lot of us did? How was that for you?
Well, it's rough. It was rough, right? I've always been a saver. So I've always kind of like had rainy day. I've been living on my own since I was 18, and I'm my mother's only child. So my mentality is you got to have yourself. There's nobody that's going to have your back. So for me, I've always had a culture of saving money, making sure, I started with like having automatic 10% of my check come out of my 10% of my weekly, my biweekly comes out and goes into a separate account. And so I had, I raised a stash of money that I could kind of live on, right, over my 23 years, along with, whatever I had in the TDA. And even before that, a lot of this is like really honestly spirit work. Because even before that, right before the pandemic hit, I was doing, I own a house in Brooklyn. I was doing some renovations, and I started doing Uber before the whole thing started to even make extra money. So I was making that extra money where I ended up paying off a huge set of my credit card debt because I was doing the Uber. And in that time, Uber was paying pretty well. So I had that, and then they let me go. So I continued doing Uber. And then, I'm also very handy. So I do a lot of like home improvement. I do like renovations. I can install bathrooms. I can install kitchens. I can do plumbing work. So a friend of mine, he does that work type of work as well. So he'll call me up or and then I started this thing called I Install It. And I put out a thing on Craigslist, and folks will call me up, say, hey, I need to install a basketball hoop. I need to install this. And I wasn't making tons of money because, I was new at this, but, it's that. And along with my family, folks who I live with, in the beginning, I used to manage mostly all of the bills in my house. And when this set off, I said, all right, folks, I can't do it now. And, folks chipped in, and we kind of just, went halvesies, or like not halves, but we kind of all just put in I guess it was a fifth of the bills. And that's kind of how I had, like, there's some weeks that I made $0, some months that I went making no money. And then another thing that I did was, right before they actually fired me, I took out a loan from my TDA. So all of them, as much money as I could get from the TDA, I took all of that out. And I said, look, if they give me my job back, then I had it there in my account. And I said, all right, if they give me my job back, I'll just put it back. So I had that money sitting there as well. And, and that's what it was. Just, and it was like juggling. It's like and it's weird because, my name, just folks, I think I should share this. My name is Mawuli Wade Oliveri. And my first name, Mawuli, means there's a God. My middle name means Mawuli Wade, means God will provide. And honestly, throughout this whole experience, that's actually what's been happening. You know what I'm saying? Like I would, get a call like, hey, I need this done, and make $2,000 for the month. You know what I'm saying? And because the family was pitching as well, I didn't really need to make tons of money, to eat. Of course, there's certain things I could not do, certain bills I could not pay, but for the most part, it's almost miraculous. I can actually say that, like, I was getting money, like, and I can tell you right now, I'm still not working. And for the month of January, February, we're in February right now, I've made $0. $0, nothing at all.
And you look fine. And wow. And it's funny that you share that because I was actually sharing that with Jose, the videographer that came from Texas. Earlier today, I was telling him, like, I don't know what it is, right? That I feel happier. I have higher self-esteem.
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't know what it is. There are times that I have struggled, but for some reason, just when I'm like, I'm about to like, I don't know, hit like a really low amount of money, somebody texts me, oh, I have this gift for you or something. And it's just, and I feel like it just happens. And I'm like, why does it happen when I feel like, and for some reason, I don't even panic anymore because I feel like, you know what, I'm lucky, I am blessed. We stood our ground, we have survived, and we're like, I don't know, I said, walking testimony that if you stand up for what's morally correct,
you know, it's funny.
You will still find your way.
Like I said, I just said that I made $0, but I actually lied because you just reminded me that on my way here today, my boy Jason just cashed at me $500.
You see?
So really, I'm really surviving. And I'm not worried about like how I'm gonna pay the bills. I'm not worried about it's just gonna happen. Like things are happening. Like I'm also doing some things. I got some I'm venturing into new avenues right now. And I'm excited about that. So I know that things are good. Like what happened?
Why don't you lose hope? That's one thing that I want to talk about because people have asked me, and I'm like, I went through like grief because you know you go through the sadness and the anger of like knowing like this is unfair.
Right.
Obviously, like I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't deserve this. I didn't do anything against the children. I didn't like go to work and not do my work. I didn't not show up to work or anything like that. So it's like crazy to me that my coworkers and principals and everyone else, they're seeing what's happening, but no one seems to care or they don't want to do the morally correct thing because they're too scared to do so. And even more bizarre to me, and I'm not sure if you can relate to this, but I'm like, we're teaching children allegedly history, and I know a lot of those history that's being taught in the school system is watered down versions of what really happened, because it wouldn't be beneficial for the school to teach children, in my opinion, the correct version of things, because they might influence the minds of children and they might actually make them think outside of the box and may actually make them rebel against the system, which is not beneficial, or whatever the case may be. And I believe in the school system, there's always one or two people that are like the rebels, because I used to tell the kids stuff there and there just because I'm like, oh, this is not the correct thing. So let me try to like plant my little seed or whatever. So isn't it odd that we were in the school system and they teach kids certain stories about slavery, which I think it's a little, I guess, of a lie, because all they teach when it comes to black people is just that we were slaves. But what were we doing before that? You know what I mean?
Right.
So how do some of these teachers tell them about the Holocaust, slavery, blah, 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 but then, okay, this is happening in real time. This is exactly how those type of things happen, because people sit back and don't fight against it.
Right. I mean, well, you know, unfortunately, we live in a world where people, we don't read. We don't really read. We don't really research. And I pray that I'm not one of those people. I don't believe I am, because I do read. I do go out and try to search for additional information. And people, and here's the issue right now, is that people have gotten too comfortable being comfortable. And, you know, everyone just we just want to sit back and Netflix and chill. That's what we really want to do. Technology has made it that we don't have to work for anything as we used to. So the government knows that, they understand that. And, you know, and that's what it is. Like, I think nobody wants to think outside of the box. Nobody wants to really, you know, I guess, wake up. Like, and just think about sleep for a minute. Just think about how comfortable sleep is. Think about how you are sitting in that sleep, how sweet it feels. And when somebody wakes you up, how disoriented you are, how sometimes in some cases you're angry that they woke you up.
I get angry.
You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people are that. They are sleeping and it's comfortable, and they want to remain that way because, you know, the things that they enjoy in life, the you know, the going out, the drinking, the, you know, the nice clothes or whatever you have, like, those things are comfortable for them. And to think about the injustice is a disruption of that sleep. You know what I mean? So in the school system, it has always been that. Again, there's nothing that I can point to that the government has produced that has been beneficial to the people. I can't.
Thank you
And
for saying
I'm a
that.
history teacher.
Oh, so
You know what I'm
this is
saying?
perfect.
Right. So I'm a history teacher, and so I know this. Everything that you think about that you were taught is a lie. You know what I'm saying? We can talk
Right.
about, you mentioned slavery. Like, that's the only thing they teach black folks. They don't talk about the fact that, that many of the black folks on this side of the world are the original people of Israel, right? Like, that's a fact. That's just undeniable at this point with DNA evidence. You know what I'm saying? But yet we only teach slave history, right? We don't teach the other stuff, like the stuff that would empower the kids, and which is part of the sleeping pills.
Indoctrination.
You know what I'm saying? It's the sleeping pills, and they've had enough of that. The government has had enough time, to really not just the government. Because when I say government, it's government and your corporations. It's all one and the same. It appears as though it's government and then it's corporation, but no. Your government and your corporations, they are colluded. They are kind of like the government is a corporation.
It is. It is. Yeah, it
You know what I'm saying? So it's like the corporations have made it where we are their source of income. So we are simply for buying their products and making them wealthy. And it's too much thought process required for human society to really synthesize what that means for their day-to-day living. You know what I'm saying? For everything, for your health. Why is it that we have so much diabetes in America? Why is it that we have so kids having diabetes? Look at the products, the processed foods that are coming from corporations. It's literally killing you. I grew up in a world where they told us milk does the body good. Like, it's indoctrination. Milk does not do your body good.
It comes from cow, and it's not human milk.
Everything you think about, that you've been taught over the years, if you just sit down and synthesize it, you realize it's been one big lie. You know what I'm saying? So how is it? And for those of us that read and go into the deep dive study, we know this, and it becomes difficult to share that with our neighbors when they are too busy on YouTube or social media, TikTok, Instagram, all of these things that makes us comfortable. Like, people literally are having bad posture because of the way they focus on that cell phone so much. You get what I mean? So, it's all one and the same. So the pandemic, it was just the right season for them to now come in and do something that they've never done before, because they know that whatever we put on the television, whatever we put on social media, they're going to believe. We already have the CDC, we have the commercials, we have the radio programs. Rochelle Walensky came out in 2021, July, to tell the world that the vaccinated and the unvaccinated had the same viral load, right? That was on the CDC's website. Nobody really read that. No media covered that. Yet, still, in 2020, that same year, they're asking folks to get vaccinated, mandatory vaccinations, and they're telling you that the CDC's telling you that, look, the same viral loads for both vaccinated and unvaccinated, which means, for those of you that don't understand, that if you're vaccinated, you can transmit the virus, right? But then if you go to your radio station, just turn on Hot 97 or WBAI, wherever there's a vaccine commercial, they'll tell you safe and effective, stops transmission, which is a blatant lie. The CDC's telling you that you can transmit it. If you're vaccinated and you're unvaccinated, you can transmit it. But yet the radio programs, all the television programs are telling you, that, oh, it stops transmission. You hear all these stories of grandparents, oh, I got vaccinated for my loved ones. Meanwhile, you can still catch it. But who's thinking about that? Who's really like paying attention? And people in these industries, they are being bought. They like, look, I know firsthand from people who work in these industries where they say, look, man, I'm just trying to take care of myself. They know what's going on, but they'll tell you like, look, I'm just trying to take care of myself, man. You better get in where you fit in. You got to pay to play. You get what I mean? So we live in a world where everyone is too focused. Well, those of us that know, like I've said this before, there's 85% of the people don't know what's going on. 85% of the people are following along, right, what they're being told by 10% of the people.
Right.
Your 10%, that's your government, that's your media personality, your billionaires. Then there's 5% of the people that know what's going on, and we're the ones trying to wake up those who are sleeping. You know what I mean? And this is the state of reality that we're in right now.
Right. Talking about hope. So how come you haven't lost hope? When you were telling me like, it's just God will provide.
Yeah.
How come you feel that way?
Because he's been providing all along. I mean, look, and this is the seed. I mean, honestly, there's a huge part of me that I'm thankful for the pandemic. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm thankful for the pandemic because the pandemic, it you know, like as I said, as me and my homie say, yo, it's pick a side season. You have to pick a side, and it's really you on God's side or you on the other side. And you know, it really showed me. It made me have to depend on my spirit. It made me realize that I am a God and I can create my reality. You know what I'm saying? And so every day I wake up and I can tell you, you may not understand this, but every day for me, it's like something amazing is happening. Every day I realize that I get a new revelation about my purpose, about what I'm supposed to be doing in this world. And it's kind of like we're living in a lives scriptures being written right now as we speak. You know what I'm saying? Like they may say the book of Joe, the book of Joe speaks, or the book of Mo, the book of whoever you are that you took a stand against government. So for me, I really feel like I'm being empowered by the spirit that's unseen by the Most High God to do what I'm doing. And I know for me, it's not about being, I have a social media platform, but you might not see me on social media all the time. You know what I mean? Because I'm out here getting my hands dirty. I'm out here doing something that I know is going to be a legacy for those coming after me. And those are my kids. You know what I'm saying? Not just my kids, but those are the kids of the people that's around me too. You know what I'm saying? For me, it's about building something that's going to be left behind so that all of the kids that's coming after you can see what you've done. You know, like I had a court case. I took my kids to the court case so that they can see.
How was that for them?
I mean, for them, they...
Do they ever say anything to you, like about everything that has happened? You going to protest, going to court, etc.
My daughter, she doesn't see it as anything. In fact, she's like with that kind of look. So, Dad, you're an influencer now. Right. So, it's kind of like, there's a saying that a prophet is not a prophet in his own home. And that's my reality. At my home house, I'm Dad, I'm her father, I'm my son's, father. And for them, it's no big deal. But what I know is I draw from my own experience. You know what I'm saying? I draw from the struggles of my mom and my grandmother, some of the things that they went through. I remember those things now, and it empowers me to move forward today. So for me, it's not about what they say to me now about what they're experiencing. It's giving them the experience that they can draw on, that they can hold on to when I'm not around, that they can remember, you know what? This is what Dad did. I remember he has a situation like this, and I remember he pushed through. You know what I'm saying? So it's not about what they're saying today. I don't really care about what they say today. It's about giving them the memory to draw from when they need it the most. Because life is going to provide them with their own struggles.
Right.
And they need to be empowered to push through those struggles based on what's righteous and not based on what the world is telling them to do.
Based on what's popular. Because this whole vaccine stuff became like a popularity contest, and oh my God, it was just horrible. The amount of nasty things people said, it basically became like a group thing stuff. And like we were scapegoated, and we became like the black sheep of this huge unhealthy, toxic family, because I feel like we are enmeshed with like the government, right?
Yeah.
In which they saw themselves as our parents and we're like the children. So those of us that see through the lies and the manipulation of this unhealthy family system became the scapegoat, and those that kept going along with the agenda are the golden children. And it appears as if they're being rewarded, but in reality, they're not. They're being used, right, as a divide and conquer strategy.
Right. But they're not. And if you're really paying attention, you realize that unfortunately, there are many people who followed along with the government's program, and they're suffering now. You know what I'm saying? Right. There are a lot of people who are sick. There are a lot of people who've died. I know some folks who've died from, shortly after taking a vaccination. You know what I'm saying? So there are a lot of people and it's going undocumented in the public forum. It's going undocumented. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not being talked about in the mainstream, but those of us who know. You know what I'm saying? So they like to paint the picture that those who did not take the vaccine are the ones dying, or they were. I'm not sure they. I hope they're not still saying that, because that's definitely not true. But there's a narrative that this is why media is dangerous, because when you look at the media is going to give you a story. But if you look specifically at people's lives, or even generally within your own community, you realize that what. You see people, like a lot of folks that I know who've passed away. In fact, everybody that I know who've passed away in this season seems to be related to vaccinations. But no, I can't speak to anyone that I can, and I'm trying to be fair here, I can't speak to anyone that I know that passed away that was unvaccinated at this point. You know what I'm saying? That's just me. I'm not saying this is not a rule of thumb for everyone, but I do believe that the vaccine itself is doing, and not to everyone. I mean, not everyone is being damaged by this, but there are a lot of folks who are having some adverse
Side
health
effects.
effects.
I mean, not everyone's body is going to react differently. And we also had to wonder, like, what if they specifically left whatever concoction they were cooking up away from certain batches, just because I feel like if the vaccines are deliberately done to cause harm on people, if I was the government, I wouldn't do it to everyone, because then it would look suspicious if you do. So it has to be little by little. And plus, everyone's body is going to react differently or whatever. With that being said, what is your final message to the world or to New York with everything that has happened?
One, find your lane, find your tribe, find your people. And also what I think is important is, like, look, you need to spend some quiet time with yourself. You need to spend some quiet time meditating, get in tune with your spirit. There's a voice inside of you that really wants to speak and guide you. And, you need to allow that voice some space, and I'm saying these are some things that I've been doing, over this era of life. Definitely meditating, getting in tune with myself, getting in tune with God, reading scriptures, reading the law as well, because you'll realize that a lot of law and scriptures very much intertwine. And those people that are leading you astray, they're also reading those scriptures that you're not reading. You know what I'm saying? Getting in tune with your nature as well, grounding. You know what I'm saying? Putting your foot on the dirt. Learning how to plant. Getting yourself very much in tune with society. And stop really looking at your government as your salvation. I know we've been told this. We've been told this all along. I know there's a whole, segment of people that's going to tell you, go out and vote, protest. We do that. We do that too. But, we do that for the face value of it, but not for the ultimate value of it. You know what I'm saying? So for me, this idea, like a lot of folks feel like, you need to go out and vote if you want to change things. And I'm just like, nah. I mean, we was like that from day one. Like, the voting is just another way to keep you sleeping. It's another way to make you feel like you did your part, right? So you go out and vote. You feel like, well, I've done my part. Now everything is going to change. No, because the corporations, though, there's no corporation that I know that votes. Pfizer doesn't vote. Does Pfizer vote? No. You know what they do? They pay lobbyists, though, to go down to your government and write laws and get the laws passed that's in their favor. So this idea of voting, in fact, I think if everybody did not vote and organize themselves, we might send a stronger message. You know what I'm saying? So, my message would be to look and to get yourself in tune, meditate, spend some quiet time. If it's hard for you, you got a cell phone, set your cell phone 15 minutes and just stay quiet in your space. See what comes to you. You know what I'm saying? See what happens. And the Spirit of God is alive and it's real. And speak to that spirit. Let that spirit massage your soul, because we need that in this season right now. I'm not saying don't go to the courts. Like I said, I'm in the courts right now. I'm fighting my case pro se. But I'm also realizing that when I step inside that court, I'm really just stepping inside the court to show them that the image of God is in your presence. That's it. The image of God is in your presence. What you gonna do about it? You know what I'm saying? Because by me demonstrating to the court that I'm here, and I didn't want to hire an attorney because I'm not giving away my God-given right to someone. I'm stepping forward as the presence of God in the court, so that when it's your time, when everyone will have their moment. They cannot say that they were not told, that they were not faced with the Spirit of God. You know what I'm saying? So That's my message.
All right. Thank you so much, Mo. And I hope that people find this video to be educational and eye-opening, because it's 2023 and a lot of people are under the illusion that everything is over and that everything is going back to normal. However, we have seen through history how when the government starts to implement something and then they take a break, eventually the next time they try to implement it again, it's going to be a lot worse. So I hope that people learn from this and that people become more self-sufficient, right? Because a lot of the issues that we have in this world, politics is never going to be able to fix it. You yourself had to make that decision to say, let me step back, let me self-reflect. And when you said to go and be by yourself, I tend to do that a lot because through isolation, I get to understand myself better and I don't have the noise from the outside world interfering with us. So,
and I want to say one last thing, which I think is also very, very important. Probably more important than anything I've ever said is assess your level of fear. Because fear is an offer. You know what I'm saying? And what I've also learned in this season is that you may feel a certain way, but it's not you all the time. So fear is an offer. And do what you can do to remove your fear. And don't make any decision based on fear.
right.
You know what I'm saying? Think about what you would do in that same scenario if you wasn't afraid. And that's what you should do. You will feel fear. I'm not saying you won't. But just because you feel fear doesn't mean you should act. You know what I'm saying? God didn't give you a spirit of fear. He gave you a spirit of power. So if you have a spirit of fear in you, that's an offer that you can reject in exchange for a spirit of wisdom, in exchange for a sound mind. Think about what you would do if you wasn't in fear, and do that.
Thank you, Mo. And we know that the government uses manipulation and fear because with fear, people are not capable of thinking rationally. And because the body goes into fight or flight, in a lot of cases, people stay stuck and don't do what the right thing that they're supposed to be doing. So thank you so much. And again, here are the stories of many New Yorkers that have been affected by the mandates. And just know that this is not over and people must continue to start standing up in their truth and power, because otherwise the next generations to come won't be able to survive anymore if we continue going down this path. So thank you so much, Mo.
Thank you. All right.